when you talk about digitalization, obviously it has lots of meanings to lots of people. And specifically what I'm referring to is, for example, increasing access to internet, smartphones, the huge data that comes with it, which you've already referred to, that brings with it a huge opportunity to monitor change, and particularly environmental change, around the globe very rapidly, and often at a high resolution that we can base our decisions on it. So, for example, something that was never possible many years ago, we could map forest cover and deforestation probably within a few days at a 30 resolution around the whole globe, and that based on freely available Landsat images. So you can connect that data then to income, soil vulnerability, socioeconomic status, with lots of other data sets to understand how people are affected. And then you can use that information to target our efforts to address problems. So, for example, there's a lot of crowdsourcing mapping exercises going on, for example, where you can, anybody of us could use just an hour to a day or a month or whatever to map areas that are prone to drought, for example, and that can then, or where earthquakes have happened, and that can then be used to target humanitarian aid.
So you're talking, for instance, like apps that, for instance, after the earthquake in Nepal, you had people all around the world, 1,000, 2,000 people across the world, mapping satellite data to find out which bridge is still working and so on. Are you referring to this kind of international?
Yeah, so that's, for example, that's a very good example. And so with the increasing data availability, the data analytic capabilities that come with it, there's a lot of potential for responding more rapidly and in the areas where it's most needed. But then, of course, at the end of the day, it depends who has access to that data and in what interest it's being used. And that's where it's also a potential threat to exacerbate. So, for example, I was referring to satellite images that are freely available, but there's a lot of data, like you were saying, that you have to buy. And then that can exacerbate, for example, the difference between the global north and the global south in who can access the data and what you can do with it.
Accessing the data, I mean, that's a keyword that's coming up at this conference a lot. And Mr. Ritchie, Europe and particularly Italy, where you're from, is facing a very high unemployment rate of young people. Do you see opportunities of digitalization and the Industry 4.0 to address that, to give people jobs?
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the question. I think that the question needs to be boiled down into a separate question. Can digitalization have an impact, and what kind of impact what we need to do? There's much talk about digitalization and digital natives, for instance. I mean, if we talk about youth unemployment in Italy, it would be the generation we usually tend to call in the media digital natives. So it gives you the idea immediately that, okay, these people will be employed easily because they are native in the digital era. I would say that depends really on the time frame we are considering. I mean, research says that in the long term, usually innovation has a positive effect on employment chances of people anyhow, and so even of the youth. However, what matters mostly in political terms is the short term, right? I mean, if we look at youth unemployment in Italy, usually it's the people who drop out of school, who are not really good educated, who might enter the discourse of digitalization in terms of consumption, purely consumption of digital content. So I think there might be an overlap actually of between the unemployed in youth and those who suffer mostly digitalization in negative terms. So in the short term, if we do not tackle this kind of lack of human capital, the most vulnerable, I would tend to say that the impact can be negative. However, this depends as well on how much the productivity, which usually is channeling actually innovation and employment, the link between innovation and employment is given by productivity usually. How much this effect of productivity can be positive and stimulate new demand on the market, for instance, and then new hiring. Industry 4.0 is a concept which relates pretty much to the manufacturing world, I would say, generally. In Italy, you had even digital agenda. It's something you had even in Spain, Greece, and Portugal, now focusing only, obviously, on Southern Europe, and obviously you have it even in northern countries. However, there is a sense of a lack of a systematic approach to the problem. So these plans and strategies would likely point on specific issues, but how about changing totally the education system? This is something which is completely going beyond Industry 4.0.
And the industry is not necessarily interested in educating people, but maybe that's something I can also we can also come back to again, because education and also lifelong learning is of course an important factor in this. And I'd like to ask our trade unionist, who of course, if you're a trade union leader, then digitalization must sound alarm, because very easily speaking, the machine takes away the job. Where do you see the trade unions then in the digital era? Are they becoming superfluous because people will be freelancers and the jobs will be taken away by digital gadgets?
Not at all, because it's nothing new for us as trade unions. We face for now 150 years the change in the industry. So that's why, to be honest, it is not really new, the challenge for us as trade unions. The problem is how we tackle it, and then we have to challenge or to discuss the economic model what we have, as we did in the last 150 years. So that's why we have to talk about, not is the digitalization the reason for poverty inequality, is the machine built on 50 years ago the reason for that? It is not the reason. The question is the distribution. We must discuss what do we do with this productivity. Every year we have an increasing rate on productivity. What we are doing with this asset, with this richness. So that's the problem. So on this, what we have to organize. On the political level, there must be a change, far apart from this neoliberal approach to say, let the market do what is doing, what is believing. Now we have this obsession on market believing. No, we have to come to a point where we say we have to regulate markets. We have to distribute the richness in the society, not only in a rich society like Germany, in other areas when we talk about Africa or so. We have to challenge that. But that's for me the biggest issue. Talking about the platform economy, the new platform economy. So we have to see. I would to distinguish a little bit what happens in the factories in this transition period. For instance, I come from the food sector, as you mentioned. I'm a cheesemaker, but I don't work as a cheesemaker. But when you see what the multinationals are organizing from the time being in this process, you can't imagine what they think about what is the future in their food system. But we tackle that. We lose jobs. But your question was, are they interested in education? Yes, they are interested. Industry is interested in education. That's why it's a very, very important thing for us to organize that. In the platform economy, it's different. In the platform economy, it's an exploitation model. What they drive. Look at this Deliveroo, Foodora, or what else they come from. Say they exploit people. They use this 20 years ago started process on deregulation. So they have almost everybody has a limited contract. So they are not able to elect works councils, as we say in German, Betriebsräte. So because they have a limited contract, after a year this contract is off, and they can't really
they can't organize. So
no, they can't organize because they are then out of the system. That's the problem. So that's why we need on the regulation base, the regulation side, a lot of regulation that we could tackle this.
But are political systems up for the challenge? I mean, we've just seen Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg talking to both the American Congress and the EU Parliament, and it sounded a bit like the politicians had no clue what they were talking about.
No, they don't have any clue. That's the problem. They don't.
So how do you regulate something you don't have a clue about?
Now you have to regulate. You have to give the frame. The frame is clear. No, for instance, no limited contracts. For instance. Then we are able to organize ourselves. So it's not a question that the government or the states organize trade union movement. labor movement. This is our job. So, but we can't organize labor or these trade unionists when they are in this precarious situation. We don't reach the people because when we don't have enough time to work with the people, then it is not possible. So that's why we must reorganize this kind of in Germany it's quite easy to say, no? This agenda politics or so. That's one of the reasons why inequality has increased.
I mean, 40% of American workers are already freelancers and will never have any kind of contract. So the question is that realistic? And I'd like to ask both of you to comment on these ideas.
I think if you're looking at the changes ahead, then the trade unions must change as well, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And I think trade unions, at least in Germany or Western Europe, they are very good at regulating things. And I think that this is important and will remain important. But in the digital economy, I think it's not enough. In the digital economy, there is this interesting slogan, to resist is to create, or to create is to resist. So I would assume in order to tackle those problems which you have indicated, I think trade unions could support, for instance, an ethical sector of the economy, and a sector in the economy that works as a cooperative, for instance. So encouraging new forms of organization, supporting those people. I think money is not the problem. They're looking at the cheapness of money right now, but I think you need somebody who organizes a new sector in the economy, and I think this is what is new for trade unions. So I think it's still a bit of a problem, because the creative class is not attracted to the trade unions in their traditional model, out of many reasons. And I think also the creative class overestimates their own propensity to organize a political conflict. So they think that because we can organize via Facebook and other things, we can organize for a political conflict, which is not true. This is, for instance, things that trade unions can do very well, but then the trade unions must cooperate with those self-organizations of workers and freelancers who will not join the union the same reason as they would not join a political party.
So yes, I fully agree. That's why I said we have to distinguish between the traditional workplace and this new economies. What we do, but it's quite challenging for us to reach the people. But we do. We here in Köln, Bonn, we organized a works council in this platform, and they organize themselves via Facebook, Instagram, and what else. So it's quite easy to bring them together when you use this new technologies. That's why I said it's also an opportunity for us.
I think you're right when you say redistribution is key, but I think that we always make the mistake, and I put the blame on my profession, the media and the journalists. When it comes to digitalization, we only talk about platform economy. But digitalization is something which goes much beyond that. So this is just one tiny aspect of the whole issue, actually. And that's why I come back to the issue of education, because we might regulate the companies, the markets, it's fine. But digitalization is about e-commerce. It's about making public institutions more transparent. It's about being able to create new activities, even for ordinary citizens. So I feel like we are in front of something which is pretty much like ordinary literacy at the beginning of the 19th century. I mean, in Italy, we had before the Republic was born, we had a majority of people who were not literate. And you needed a huge public investment. And there I find a contact point with you about redistribution. But what do we do with the money? That's the issue, right? So I think we need really a large-scale intervention on reforming our education system, and which implies as well being able critically to evaluate, is our teaching force adapt to the task, actually? So it's in my opinion, it's much bigger than only the platform issue.
Maybe it's a good point then to enter our two front row speakers in this, because Mr. Burns is also very interested in small and medium-sized enterprises. He runs one, incidentally. when we talk about digitalization, we talked about this before the panel a little bit, not everybody benefits in the same way. A week ago, a poll revealed that in many small companies in Germany, for instance, people think they can't really benefit from digitalization. They don't have enough skills. The companies themselves say that they can't cope with the change. So how can SMEs keep pace with these quick developments? Can they keep pace with developments? And it would be nice if somebody... The mic is coming there.
Oh, well, I'll leave you with that one. Small businesses particularly find this difficult because they are trying to look at their whole business. And they're not the only one that finds difficulty in this. I'd like to give the audience something to think about. Digitalization is just another set of tasks in business. A business, all business, any business, it doesn't matter. Just a long list of tasks. Some you'll outsource to accountants, lawyers, bankers, transport companies. Some you'll do inside the business. Some done by staff, some done by others. Digitalization will come in. It'll take some of the tasks and throw them out. Not needed. And put new tasks in. If we actually think that this is what is going to happen, and it is going to happen, then start to address it on that basis. Stop talking about the whole job changing, people losing their job. What we've got to address is, can we retrain the existing staff we've got to pick up these digital tasks that will be in business? And more importantly, the next generation that's coming in, the children that are coming into businesses, do they have the skills to perform those tasks? You know, I am surprised at how many people can't use a keyboard. My goodness, can't use a keyboard. They're getting used to touching monitor screens. But then when they come into a small business, they suddenly find a keyboard again. They go, oh, what am I supposed to do with this? Oh, what shortcuts? Control P. What did you say that does? You know, we're talking about pretty basic stuff here.
You say the digital natives are on the back seat here. They're not good enough to run your machinery.
Well, no, it's not that they aren't good enough. They just haven't been taught it. You know, we, for example, have big, huge forestry machines. And people think out in the forest, so that's all labour stuff. That's heavy work. No, big, huge machines, massive technology. And to work them, keyboards and buttons. So technology comes in all sorts of areas, but stop seeing this as a job issue. What tasks are we needing to do, and what tasks do we need to teach our education system to teach our children? That's why businesses are finding it difficult, because they keep being told, oh, it's a loss of jobs, it's new jobs in, it's old jobs out. They're confused.
Ms. Miltovic, we've just talked about politicians a little bit who will have to regulate this new economy, or not so new economy, if you say that machines have been around for 150 years. In Europe, we have fairly high standards for goods and services, and we pride ourselves in the EU. We have all these standards. And also we have the rights of consumers that are being respected. But now in this digital economy where everything can happen anywhere and remotely, that's under threat. So how do you ensure that these regulations stay in place, that workers' rights are respected, that consumers' rights are respected? That seems pretty impossible.
Yes, thank you. You are correct regarding the EU law. Regarding the consumer rights, it's true that it's really high standards succeed over the many years by collective work, by different institutions, including consumer movement. We get rights that EU citizens think that they are granted forever. Well, they are changing, and we need to ensure that they are in place, like rights not to be misled, or to have the price of a product clearly displayed, or use withdrawal rights, or obtain redress when something goes wrong, for example. So all these rights are something that we think was been for many years, and we really use it. But in nowadays, actually, to being a consumer, it's not so easy, because you can't even pay the bill without using your digital skills. You can't really switching electricity or gas provider, or even compare different offers in the market if you don't use or navigate in a digital environment. Where I see, and you asked more about enforcement and about how we can be sure, I think I see the big role, and why we are here. It's also Economic and Social Committee gathers different NGOs. And we as consumer movement organizations can help consumers to arrange different collective campaigns or collective switching from one electricity provider to another one, or to arrange collective purchasing in order to benefit more in the marketplace. So I think I see the role, while we need to understand that only to being active consumer is beneficial, while we need to help also consumer that is lagging behind in the digitalization.
You just mentioned that, of course, consumers they have more access to information as well, so it's good. Maybe one last question I would like to ask the panelists here before I open to everyone in the audience. Digital tools and technologies can potentially be used anywhere, even some very remote place, as long as there is an internet connection. And we do have technologies. Mr. Musk, what's his name? I want to say Mr. Tesla, but you know who I mean. He's talking about mobile internet via balloons that can be brought to the last place in the jungle, theoretically. It's not true yet. But some of my colleagues tell me they have better internet connectivity in Liberia, reporting about the Ebola crisis last year, than they have between Cologne and Bonn. When you drive through Brühl, you always have a hole. You can't. But the point is, if all these technologies and the work can be done remotely, isn't that a big chance to even out inequalities in the world, within countries, between poor and rich countries? Isn't that a great potential?
I think the interesting thing with scenarios of the digital society is, I think that the end picture is pretty clear. So I think the picture is that we have more or less fully automated factories run by robots, also led or managed by robots. Why not? And those factories, those lights-out factories, they pay taxes for the community, and the community then can sustain its members, and the participation rate in the economy will not be 70 or 80%, but maybe it will be 50 or 60%, and the rest of the society is somehow supported, and they're doing the things they want to do. Work in education, work in culture, whatever they want to do. And however, I think it will not come to all the countries at the same time. So I think there are three scenarios which can coexist in time. One is that the digitization will be successful, and I have no doubts that it will be successful in the Western world. There will be.
Are you an optimist?
My wife tells me no, but I think the Western countries will somehow manage it. There will be more successful ones, and there will be some ones which will be a bit slower. And then I think there will be a row of countries where it will be a mixed blessing. I think maybe they have urban areas which are highly successful, and then many regions of the country which is absolutely neglected. And maybe where then international platforms will take over the infrastructure, just like Chinese infrastructure companies are already in almost all Arab and African countries doing their work. So I think this is a second scenario, which I think is highly likely, especially for Middle Eastern countries, Africa. And then you have the third scenario where the digitization will totally fail, and where you will do everything to isolate the area. You build walls, and you use drones to avoid people migrating. And I think we can see countries like Afghanistan or maybe Gaza, where you are already trying out this new surveillance technology in order to keep the population there, and not investing your own young people there. So I think those three scenarios are conceivable. I'm very optimistic for the Western world. I think for the rest, it's a mixed blessing. It depends very much on how successful China will be. And I think it will be what everybody thinks, it will be a race between China and the countries that cooperate with China. I think mainly Asia and Africa, and the Western world God knows what the Americans will do. So it's a very complex situation. But at Western Europe, I think I'm pretty positive.
Mr. Ritchie.
I cannot talk really about China. I can talk about Italy. And it looks like digitalization is increasing actually geographical imbalances in the country. And when we talk about smart cities, which is a really not nice concept, they are mainly located in northern Italy, which is pushing ahead the historic inequality.
Richer.
Yeah, between the south and the north. And on top of that, I'm worried about how these geographical inequalities play out in Europe and not only in Italy. I mean, we, from our country, well-educated people keep migrating towards northern countries, like Germany, for instance. And it's mostly, not only, but mostly well-educated people, which are those who would not be actually hit by the digitalization. And so this is brings problems of human capital between northern and southern Europe. So I think we can... I'm not totally optimistic, actually. I mean, I'm afraid that this digitalization can increase further differences, which we had already on an industrial level, maybe. But until, I mean, the 50s, 70s, Italy was fairly having industries even in southern countries. Some, obviously. There was already huge differences. But how is this impacting on our societies? It's worrisome.
And I promised that I'll open the panel in a minute, but I'd like to ask Mrs. Schleicher, are you more optimistic or pessimistic when you just said that there are chances that digitalization will help the environment, or at least assessing what the problems in the environment are? But are there also pessimistic perspectives on that?
Yeah, there certainly are. And I would say that similar to the scenarios you've just described, it's very likely there'll be a mixture of how it plays out around the world. And yes, of course, what you were mentioning about internet connection being available in lots of different places, but that's obviously not everything. There's so many other aspects. And, you know, just the data access we were talking about earlier, yes, so just because you have internet obviously doesn't mean you have access to lots of other things. And so I think it's likely to also increase marginalization of certain communities. And with regards to the environment, ultimately, we will have the same problem we already have without the digital area. If we don't regulate certain things, if we don't set standards on what is it that really matters in the society, do we want an environmentally sustainable future for this planet, then there will not be one unless we set it as a priority. And so in the digital area, that will just make things more complicated and more tricky to overcome. But we still have to solve issues of transparency and setting the same indicators for what we want our future and our society to look like.
And talking about transparency, we'll be very transparent and let you ask questions now. Please tell us very briefly, if you have one, who you are. And it would be great if you really just ask a question, because then we can discuss it. There's mics that could go around. Are there any hands raised? No questions? Come on. Okay, no question. So the gentleman on the right and then the person in the back, please. And there's Pauline too. Okay, 3.
My question here, my name is Rafiqullah, I'm from Bangladesh. I run a FM radio station. So we're talking about digitalizations and inequalities. I hope we all agree that digitalization or the digital world or digital age has already established and it is going forward. No doubt about that. We cannot ignore the digitalization in the world. It is a reality. There is no way. My question here is that how we can protect or practice our digital world or digital products safely for our personal safety, for national safety, for wealth safety, for safety for the world. So in one word, we all know for cybersecurity. So digital is all about internet.
So how do we maintain cybersecurity?
How we maintain the cybersecurity? Because if we cannot secure our digital age, then everybody will be affected. Okay. Everybody will be affected. We can see news, the hackers are hacking billions of dollars from the Reserve Bank.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Digital security. That's one question. Maybe we'll take the second question from the gentleman and then answer.
Thank you. My name is Dinesh. I'm from India. So I have this question when Sir was mentioning the digitalization is not the like a problem for the labor. So he mentioned in the end there is a problem of distribution, and then he also replied that what will do with the money. So and then he said this education. So I will just clarify: is distribution of the money only or something else? Thank you.
Okay, that was not a question. That was just a comment. Okay, that's a question. Okay, and maybe then we answer these two questions and then we ask the third one. So, who wants to talk about digital security?
Yeah, so digital security, the answer is regulation. We got it right now in Europe. So we have a new law, and this is one step to secure our data. So it's a good example how regulation could work, and let's see what is the outcome of that. Coming to the question, when I talk about distribution, I guess that everybody is aware how big the gap between the rich and the poor in that world is. Only a couple of families have about the half of the richness of the world, and in comparison to half of the people, of the inhabitants of this planet. So that means, of course, we talk first about money. So, and what we do with the money, that's the point. I don't talk about the distribution that we give everybody €1 or $1 more. This is not our distribution. What we're talking about is trade unions. It is about give. By the way, it is also a gain of the SDGs. What we
the Sustainable
talking
Development
about
Goals.
the Sustainable Development Goals. So of 17 of them, there are a lot. There's one about hunger, about zero hunger, about no poverty. There's one, we don't leave people behind us. No? So this is also one. What we do now in this world is we leave billions of people behind us. We don't take them with us in the development of digitalization, for instance, on one point. So to give an example, so the new drink water regulation, what was the proposal in Europe, is the risk management is only, this is the proposal of the Commission, is only to say we make it online. So my mother is 82. She's not online, not online, not at all. She's not able to apply. So there are a lot of people, by the way, that don't want to be online after work. So we have a movement also coming back, but Baiba said we are not able to do that. So we have to think on that as well, not only to see that people are keen. I have 2 smartphones, but not everybody wants to have only one. So that's why let's distinguish a little bit. Distribution means take the money from the rich and give it to the institutions that they organize education or what else is necessary to do. When we would take, to give you, and I know a lot of people don't like that, but we have to talk about that. When we would take 40% of the richest people in Europe, we wouldn't have any debts in Europe. No member state would have had debts. Only 40%. So this is what we have to talk about. Not only to see, the market will regulate and let's see. So we need the money in the systems and we would be able to drive it.
Okay, of course.
Because I think you come from Bangladesh, you said, and you come from India. And I think those countries, they show us the urgency of the problem. So I think in 3 to 4 years, we will have robots that can sew textiles. They cannot do it right now, but in 3 to 4 years they will be ready. So that's what everybody says. So what will happen with the million of people that are employed in India and Bangladesh in the textile industry? What can you do with them? Do you have an income for them? Can you provide them with social security, whatever? I think these are really urgent problems, and this is why I was very convinced about the Western world. I'm not so convinced that it will not lead to big problems in some of those countries, because as long as the country is using low wages to become competitive in the international economy, this will not work any longer, because the robot can produce it for just a fraction of the cost that you already have. So if wages are not important
But if you talk about India, you already have a service industry that is kind of digitalized when you think of the many services that Indians, for instance, do for North Americans.
Yeah. Now, I'm talking about the short run now, and what can India or Bangladesh do in the next 4 or 5 years if 10 or 15 million people become unemployed from one day to the next? I mean, this would be a huge problem for every society. But what can societies do that don't have a social security net? And I think then there's always the chance that it might lead to huge problems, and even the breakup of nation states. I mean, we had that before, and this is this needs to be brought to the attention of people. So if we talk about many problems here in the West, I think looking at the problems that those countries have, I will not say it's tiny, that they're tiny problems, but I think they can be managed. And even problems between northern Italy and southern Italy, I think over 10 or 15 years there's a chance of equalizing it a little bit. But if I look at the problems of those countries, I think it's a different stories. And I have not seen that this is part of a political debate. I think the last debate we had about was in the 70s, where social democrats were trying to reach a new world order. But since then, nothing very much has happened. So I'm a bit worried about that.
There was one more question in the back, and Mr. Majumdar after that.
I'm Pauline. I'm from the United Nations System Staff College. I have a statement, and the statement is...
a question too, Pauline?
Yes, and a question. So the statement is the technology is not providing or causing the inequality, but the policies around it or the lack of it. And the example that I have is Amazon and abused in 1992 a law where it says that if you don't have a physical office, you are not taxed. And of course, they abuse that. And you also, another example is that 8 companies own most of the wealth in the world. And is that because of technology or because of the lack of policies? And if it's the lack of policies in place, what policies should we adopt so that we can bridge this gap, this inequality that is being caused by digitalization? And what can civil society organizations, including the media, do to bridge this?
Okay, shall we ask this question? Answer this question first? Yep.
I don't agree with you on the fact that inequality is about much more, actually. I mean, not having access, because we are thinking, I think it's a reasonable thing that people in this room have access to internet, good internet every day. The point is that digital inequality is even about access to internet, for instance. And on this side, actually, this has nothing to do with Amazon or with platforms. So, and this is even to follow up on a comment of before, actually, we should talk even about digital inclusion. I mean, it's not only about digital inequality. And I think it's not by chance, for instance, that since we have more digitalization, actually people feel more lonely, which brought us actually even politically to some situations where people feel excluded from the public discourse. I mean, how can you explain political dynamics sometimes? I just mentioned Brexit, Trump, etc., etc. I mean, the geographical factor and the isolation factor has played a role there. So it's just to say that I don't agree about framing the inequality issue only in terms of this platform or e-commerce or big companies. On the policies, I leave the word to others. Maybe.
Do the others want to comment?
As I already mentioned, as my beginning was to say, not the digitalization itself is the problem. The problem is indeed what's about the policies what we have. So, and coming always again back, I fully agree with your analysis to say what happens in worlds. We have systems. We are able to adapt, to adjust the systems, but only in Africa to see what happens in the next years when the birth rate keeps the rate what is from the time being. Africa needs 20 million jobs per year. 20 million jobs per year. So what happens? So we can discuss the digitalization, what we want. So these problems we will have. That's why the question is, again, we have to face these problems, especially when we talk about these SDGs, when we talk about all the things. We need a shift in the economic model. So we need a shift in the distribution model. Otherwise, we will fail. We will see what happens. For me, it's quite clear. So, we have to address that at every time. That's why I sit here today and address it, because I'm convinced when we don't talk about this issue, we will fail. We can talk about the environment, as we can talk about social issues. We have to change the way where we go.
One person who's trying to do a little bit about the 20 million jobs in Africa is, I think, the question from Mr. Majumba, I hope, because he's with UNESCO Univoc. And please, what's your question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Shamal Majumdar, heading the UNESCO Univoc International Center. You know, anytime when technology innovation comes, there are two words always important. One is challenges, another is opportunities. I like to know from you a little bit live example that how technology really reducing inequality. Give us a little bit of example, not challenges part. I'm talking of only opportunities. Give example, technology as a level playing field that reducing the inequality. My second question is, do you have any example, the country specific, which has got leapfrog using this technological revolution? No incremental growth, but leapfrogging the whole thing. Do you have any example throughout the world, any country has taken that route?
Mr. Arani has itchy feet already. Just
No, I have not achieved it. But when you look at leapfrogging, I think sub-Saharan Africa, in many respects, especially in the finance industry, I think is a very good example. So what you had in sub-Saharan Africa was you had a very weak network of banks. You had very limited access to grants for most of the population. And here they have used the internet to build up platforms in the financial services sector, for instance, that provide payments very easily. And I think they're sometimes even more advanced than here in Western Europe. So I think they are really top at this area. When it comes to just a short comment, when it comes to leveling the inequalities, I think in principle, the internet and new social media have given us everything we would need. So we have access to all the blueprints of a civilization, right? So this is the first time in history I can access everything I want to know. So in principle, this is something very positive. The second thing is, however, access is not everything, but collaboration or cooperation also needs to be included. And I think this is where we are lacking. So in principle, we have lots of opportunities, but in reality, it's very difficult to implement them because we don't know what organization model, or we even don't know what society model is the right one. So the technology is quite ahead, but we have not figured out how to use it the right way.
Do you want to have an example?
Sure.
For example, where digitalization or technology has decreased the inequality. In factories, for instance, when the digitalization or this computer-based work on the machine was introduced, this had led to higher wages in a certain extent for the lower paid people. So this had increased because the acceptance was then higher, not to press buttons or on the keyboards, but to steer the machines by this kind of technology has increased in some cases the wages. So, but these are the examples from the shop floor.
So, I would add that in the near future we can see that it doesn't make sense to make a distinction between a manager and an employee any longer because the technology they use is simply the same.
I know about an experiment which has been going on in the city of Bologna in Italy. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact name of the initiative, but I know that platform workers created a platform themselves to organize and unite in absence of intervention of trade unions, actually, and which led them to interact more efficiently with public administration, and which lifted them up on an equal negotiating level with the business. Then obviously even the trade union came in and everything worked out fine in the end. But this was a typical example of how technology can be used as well by the workers themselves, and so reducing inequality. Another example, which is more related to the media sector. There's a really nice, beautiful project, in my opinion, which was born in Germany, which is called Hostwriter, which is a platform which connects journalists of different countries and which enables everyone to create cross-border journalism stories, which might sound something of little importance, but the point is that if you're not an affirmed journalist, for instance, the wealth of a network, which you have as an established journalist, was something which was really important, actually. And nowadays, for instance, with this platform, any wannabe journalist could contact a journalist in Berlin and co-work on a story, and which is, I don't know, it's not exactly about inequality, but in a sense, it's kind of leverage.
I also have an example from environmental perspective more. I mean, I think that technologies obviously depend on whose hands they end up in and what they're being used for. But for example, we were talking about drones earlier, which can be a threat, but they're also used, for example, by indigenous communities in Peru, Bolivia, to map their indigenous territories. So by giving them empowering them to map their own territories, but also be able to defend them from, for example, outside extraction, they again put on an equal playing field. Whether then they get equal voice is a different question, but the technology, at least in that sense, can help empower them.
Thank you very much. And with a look at the time, unless there's one very brief last question, I would like to come to the end of this panel, but not without asking our experts here for their best recipes. I mean, if everybody just gives us a minute of their best ideas, then we'll have it all fixed with the problems with digitalization. Mrs. Schleicher, from your point of view, what is most important now? How do we create a more just society with digitalization?
I would come back to what various people have already said. It's about distribution and about integrating social, environmental, and economic perspective into a whole, and not leaving any of those behind.
Mr. Ritchie.
I will stick to my sector again this time. I think media need to get it right. We need to have an honest and a wide discussion about this topic. Try to get rid of only just focusing on the bad news and the good news. There's a whole gray area in between. We need to be able to explain as journalists to citizens the concepts of the digital economy. So what is the gig economy? What is different from the gig economy from the crowd economy? And and we didn't tackle it, but media themselves actually need to somehow skill up inside.
We've got a big conference on this topic, so
yeah.
Maybe we'll hear more about it here at the GMF. Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, take the SDGs as a gift and fulfill the SDGs. So then we will reduce the inequality.
Well, that's very simple then, not just 17 SDGs, 196 goals.
Yeah, but
easy.
The question is how to implement it in the daily policy areas, in the business as well, because almost every country has signed it. So that's an obligation. When we would take it seriously, we could come to that world that we will reduce the inequality. So simple is it. And again, more distribution. Redistribution.
Mr. Ani, you've got the last word.
Maybe it would make sense to try out new models of working and living together. And my best guess would be that they are more at the community level than on the nation-state level. So maybe we need to experiment more on collaboration, cooperation, participation on a community level, because this is where all the social media tools work. You mentioned the story of Bologna, for instance. There are many others in northern Italy. So maybe we should try this out and develop a new society based on the experiences we have at the community level.
Thank you very much. Please give a very warm welcome. Thanks for these great panelists. And thank you all in the audience for coming. I know that it's already late in the afternoon, but there's more you can hear at this GMF, of course. Thank you for coming and for your interest. Goodbye on behalf of the EESC and wishing you an exciting conference.